The stratum basal layer is where we're going to have a lot of rapid mitosis. So we're going to find our youngest cells, and we're going to find this pigment that protects us from UV rays called melanin. And actually, melanocytes actually produce the melanin. Okay, just like creatinocytes produce creatine. And here we just have the 5 layers. It's depicted for you here. We have the dermis, which is down here, which isn't part of the epidermis, but we have our epidermis right here, the stratum corneum, the stratum granulosum, the stratum spinosum, the stratum basal, and here we have our melanocytes and our melanin, and this is where you're going to find your melanocytes. We're also going to talk about the Langerhans cells, and this is actually a cell that is a part of the immune system. It creates some immunity for your skin, fights off infection. There's also some other cells in there that actually fight infection that are located in your skin for that, very reason. If bacteria you acquire or cut, bacteria comes, inhibits that area, we have cells there that will combat that. We also have the Merkel cell, which is a part of the nervous system and actually helps relay sensations that we feel in our skin to our brain. We have thick skin that's going to cover our palms, fingertips, and soles of feet, and then we have thin skin, which covers the rest of our body. It's missing the stratum lucidum and sometimes the stratum granulosum. Cells of the epidermis, like I just said, there's the keratinocytes, the melanocytes, the Merkel cells, and the Langerhans cells. The majority of the cells are the keratinocytes that produce keratin, a fibrous protein that helps in protecting our skin. It's connected by desmosomes and arises in the stratum basal area until they reach the outer surface of the dominant cell's content. Here they are dead, scale-like structures. We shed our skin about every 25 to 45 days, like we've said this before. So here again, we're talking about the epidermis. We have the stratum basal, which is the deepest layer. It contains the only epidermal layer that receives adequate nourishment via diffusion from the dermis, and cells are constantly undergoing mitosis. And that's what characterizes the stratum basal layer. And moving on. So then we have the dermis, which is the true skin. It contains sensory receptors for pain, pressure, touch, and temperature. Vascular, so it has blood vessels, and it forms a basement membrane. We have the papillary layer, which is thin. It has projections of collagen and elastin in the basement membranes. Areolar tissue and elastic fibers. The papillary layer is actually what is responsible for our fingertips, or fingerprints, excuse me. Let me see if I can. If we look here, we see the dermal, the papillary layer right here. And as you can see, it's very rigid, and this is actually what will form our fingertips, or fingerprints, excuse me. We have the reticular layer, which is a skin network. It's thick, dense, fibrous, connective tissues, elastic fibers. It's stretchable. It has our Arrector Pili muscles, which attach to hair follicles and contract when cold. We'll talk about that just a little bit later. And then we have, actually, if we stretch this layer out too thin and actually tear this layer, that's what will happen. We'll have stretch marks. Stretch marks will occur if we take this reticular layer and we stretch it too far too fast, and tears form in the elastic fibers. We'll see that as stretch marks. So this is the papillary layer. It's a thin superficial areolar connective tissue with collagen and elastin fibers. There's a superior surface that appears as peg-like projections called the dermal papillae that indent the epidermis. This is actually going to have some touch receptors, some pain receptors, some capillary loops, so some blood vessels in there, tiny blood vessels. If we go just, touching back on this, the peg-like projections, I just showed you those in the previous illustration. We have these peg-like projections, and that's actually what's going to contribute to our fingerprint, which is kind of cool. We have our reticular layer, which is 80% of the dermal thickness, is dense, irregular tissue. It contains our blood vessels, sweat, and oil glands. It has deep pressure receptors, so we do have some deep pressure receptors there, and some phagocytes, which prevent bacteria from penetrating into deeper body layers. Okay, just real quick, we talked about melanocytes, which are located right here in the stratum basal layer, right below the dermis, or right above the dermis. This is what's going to produce melanin. There's some genetics to this, because melanin actually is going to contribute to your skin color. The quantity of melanin is going to actually contribute to whether you see it as a yellow to reddish, to brownish to black, the quantity of the melanin in the skin. This melanin is actually our body's natural defense to protect our skin from UV radiation. So the UV rays that we get from the sun, our body actually produces melanin, which acts as a natural barrier to block those UV rays out, kind of like sunblock does. So when we go out in the sun and we tan, and or we go out in the sun to tan, that's what's actually happening. Our melanocytes are producing melanin to make our skin a little tanner or a little darker. And melanocytes, they use this enzyme to convert tyrosine into dark brown melanin pigments. Albinos lack the DNA code to make this to make the enzyme. The sunlight increases melanin production by affecting the release of the hormones. So if you have freckles or moles, there are accumulations of melanin. Our body actually will create those freckles to protect our skin's DNA from the sun, because that sun can actually form mutations in our DNA. So if our body produces these freckles, then it kind of blocks that out. That's also why a lot of times you have to check your moles and your freckles to make sure that they don't have, for irregular borders, to make sure that you don't have skin cancer. because that could be occurring. Other pigments such as keratin and hemoglobins contribute to your skin color. There are three pigments. The amount and kind of melanin, yellow, reddish, brown, or black, will contribute. And a lot of times when we have fair skin, we see fair skinned paired with freckles. That's because they actually lack melanin production. And of course, the more melanin that you produce, the tanner you are, the darker you are. The amount of keratin deposited in the stratum corneum and subcutaneous tissue will also contribute to that, and the amount of oxygen bound to the hemoglobin will contribute to that. Like if you saw someone that's not breathing well, not getting a lot of oxygen, of course you see them turning blue, kind of in that same concept, but not completely. Freckles and pigmented moles are large accumulations of melanin. Melanocytes are stimulated when the skin is exposed to sunlight, like we just been talking about. Prolonged exposures causes substantial melanin buildup, which helps protect the DNA of viable skin cells from UV radiation by absorbing the light and dissipating the energy as heated. So hair, except for the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet, lips and nipples, and some genitalia, you're going to find hair that covers your body. Hair actually covers almost every surface of your body. We have the hair follicle that consists of the shaft, root, medulla, cortex, and cuticle. On average, you're going to have 4 inches of growth per year, or 2 millimeters a week. I don't want to get into too much of this, but we do see male pattern baldness, which is, contributed to genetic, sex-linked, genes. Moving on. Okay, so here we all have, our hair shaft, our arrector, pili, our sebaceous gland, our hair root, and our hair bulb in the follicle. And what I really want to talk about is the sebaceous gland and the arrector pili. The arrector pili muscle is a muscle that contracts and pulls the hair into position more perpendicular to the surface of the skin, causing the hair to stand on end. Movement of the hair follicles will cause goosebumps, and this normally happens in response to cold or frightening situations. So what happens is we actually have this little muscle right here, and if you look, you'll see it. It's just this little teeny muscle, and it will pull the hair more perpendicular, so pull the hair more upwards. And this normally occurs when you get, cold, or when you're in a frightening situation. This is what's going to cause goosebumps. Here we're talking about skin glands. We have sweat glands that are found in the palms, feet, and forehead, or found in auxiliary or our genital regions. When we talk about our sweat glands are in our palms and feet and forehead, we perspire sweat, which is 99% water. In the auxiliary, we're going to have a little bit different of sweat. It's more of a milky color there. And we'll talk about exactly why that is. We have our sebaceous glands and the dermis that secrete they create sebum oil for the hair and skin. This is also antifungal and antibacterial components to it. Here we have our sebaceous oil glands. They're found all over except on the soles and palms of your feet. They normally empty into the hair follicle, and they create sebum, which is a mixture of oily substances and fragmented cells that acts as a lubricant that keeps the skin soft and prevents the hair from becoming brittle, and it also contains chemicals that kill bacteria. Here we have our sweat glands. We have two types, the eccrine or the apicrine, and the eccrine or the merocrine glands sweat clear secretions, primarily water and salts, and this is what we're going to find, in our in our armpits, but the palms, forehead, feet. This is what kind of sweat we're going to have. Then we have the epicrine or the apicrine, which we're going to have in our axillary and genital areas. They contain secretions of fatty acids and proteins, as well as eccrine substances that can appear milky white or yellow. Also, in our hair, our dermis, along with our hair, we're going to find blood vessels. And these are found in the reticular layer of the dermis. It controls body temperature. When cold blood vessels widen, and when it's cold, so that should say when it's cold, blood vessels widen and increase blood supply to the skin, thus transferring heat from deeper tissues to the skin. So you actually have blood vessels, and they have the ability to widen or constrict. And when they widen, they actually bring heat from deeper tissues to the skin. In contrast, they constrict when the skin gets hot and we perspire. Also, when these blood vessels will also constrict when there's a lot of pressure put on them. So pressure from maybe laying in bed, or being in the same position for a long time actually will exert pressure on them and will cut off that blood supply, and that's when you start to see bed sores and things like that. So people that are confined to a bed, the elderly or paralyzed, need to be rotated frequently in order to prevent these bed sores from happening. And this is actually one of the things that they look for when they're it's a dead giveaway of neglect when taking care of the elderly or someone that might be paralyzed. Another question that I put on here is, you may have noticed that on a very cold winter day that your nose or ears turn red when outside for prolonged periods of time. Why do you think this is? So you could probably imagine that if you're increasing blood supply to your head, to your nose and your ears, then they would turn red. And that's why, because we're actually increasing that blood supply to the ears and the nose. Okay, and just to end this, just some physiology about the skin. We have protection from microorganisms, chemicals, physical injury, dehydration, UV lights. We have some sensation. So we have receptors in our skin that actually pick up on sensations or sensory and relay that message to our brain, such as, hot, cold, touch, things of that nature. Excretion, we have our sweat actually contains uric acid, ammonia, urea, salt, water, so we have some excretion there. Metabolism, our skin actually helps us produce vitamin D production by absorbing UV rays, and we have some immunity there. We have some T cells, uh, Langerhans cells, macrophages. They're found in the skin to fight microorganisms. And then we have some temperature regulation, um, which varies. We have a set body temperature of 37.6 Celsius to 36.2 Celsius. Heat produced comes from metabolism in muscles and glands. Heat is lost if blood vessels widen. We call this vasodilation. Heat is saved if blood vessels constrict, vasoconstriction. Regulated. This is all regulated by the hypothalamus, which we'll talk about when we talk about the brain, which is a part of the brain. All right, so that's it.